Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the 24-hour global event on the environmental rule of law. I'm Georgina Lloyd, Regional Coordinator of Environmental Law and Governance for the Asia-Pacific region of the United Nations Environment Programme. And I'm joined in this opening session by Rocky Guzman, the Deputy Director of the Asian Research Institute for Environmental Law, who is co-hosting this event. I would like to extend my thanks to Ariel for their support. Today, the 31st of May, 2022, if you're in our part of the world, marks the 40th anniversary for the commencement of the Montevideo Program for the development and periodic review of environmental law. This milestone year also marks the 50th anniversary of the Stockholm Declaration, the 50th anniversary of the United Nations Environment Programme, and the 30th anniversary of the Rio Summit. This year is an ideal occasion to celebrate the progressive development of environmental rule of law and the achievements of member states, international organizations, and the global community to address environmental challenges through the law at this time. The United Nations Environment Programme has been working on the environmental rule of law since UNEP's creation in 1972 and engages with member states and other actors to promote and advance the environmental rule of law through its law projects and the Montevideo Program.
Over the next 24 hours, we will celebrate environmental rule of law through a series of thematic sessions, starting in the Pacific and moving around the globe to South America and finishing in Montevideo, the birthplace of the Montevideo Environmental Law Program. You can see all these sessions on the screen. But first, we wish to thank all our partner institutions, including the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, IUCN Academy of Environmental Law, the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment, Africa Judicial Training Network on Environmental Law, Association of Environmental Law Lecturers in African Universities, Association of Environmental Law Lecturers in Middle East and North African Universities, Law Asia, Client Earth, the Asian Development Bank, Instituto Interamericano de Justicia y Sostenibilidad, Centro de Derecho Ambiental, Uruguay, Environmental Defenders Office, Australia, Environmental Law Institute, the National Environmental Law Association in Australia, Climate Reality Project Philippines, and the Foundation Mohammed VI for la Protección del Environment, among others who have joined this effort. I would now like to invite the Director of the Law Division, Ms. Patricia Mabote, to provide some opening remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the next 24 hours as we traverse the globe celebrating 40 years of international environmental law. Environmental law has become part and parcel of international law and has grown dramatically as we have realized the need first to protect the environment, but also to link environment to other areas of law, such as security and human rights. We have seen many countries already enshrine the right to a healthy environment in their constitutions, as well as put in place framework environmental laws. Many countries have also established ministries of environment, agencies to enforce environmental law, as well as green court. And we also see at the international level that UNEP has a clear mandate to lead the United Nations system in supporting governments in the development and implementation of environmental rule of law. We have seen also the role of science and policy interface in strengthening implementation of environmental law growing. And in the last 50 years, we see science playing a critical role in, first of all, making countries see the importance of dealing with mercury, as they did in the Minamata Convention, and also in phasing out ozone-depleting substances. Aligned to environmental law and critical to it are human rights. Human rights obligations related to the environment protect people and the planet. And it is important to note that on the 8th October 2021, The United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution recognizing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, which is an imperative step for the growth and enforcement of environmental rights in many jurisdictions. UNEP supports environmental human rights defenders and has continued to raise awareness among member states and civil society about how important the rights of human rights defenders are in realizing environmental protection in the long term. Progressively, and in a bid to strengthen the right to a healthy environment, we have seen the appointment of a special rapporteur on the promotion of the protection of human rights in the context of climate. And that is a very important step. We also see an expanding scope of beneficiaries with UNEP supporting the Committee of the Rights of the Child, and also UNEP working closely with the women's rights organizations to bring in gender into the delivery of its environmental law mandate. Going forward, UNEP will do 4 things. 1, under the Montevideo program, UNEP will promote information and data exchange, education and capacity building, and technical assistance to strengthen national environmental governance systems and enhance the environmental rule of law. Secondly, UNEP will support member states at their request and collaborate with the wider UN system to enhance the effective and inclusive promotion, protection, and respect of the now recognized human rights obligations relating to the enjoyment of a safe, clean, and healthy environment. Thirdly, UNEP will support national governments by promoting information and data exchange, education, capacity building, and technical assistance to strengthen national environmental governance systems, as well as improve the environmental rule of law at national levels to address the triple planetary crisis. And finally, UNEP will ensure that science remains at the core of all decision-making processes as an integral part of the environmental rule of law.
Thank you, Patricia, for these remarks. So now, before we head into the 24-hour celebration, it's important to reflect and to learn a bit more about the Montevideo program. The history of the Montevideo Program for the Development and Periodic Review of Environmental Law, or known as the Montevideo Environmental Law Program, dates back to 1982, when UNEP's Governing Council adopted the first edition of the program. The Governing Council was established in 1972 following the Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment as a forum to address emerging and pressing environmental policy issues. It, of course, was replaced in 2014 by the United Nations Environment Assembly, or UNEA, which enjoys universal membership and is the world's highest level decision-making body on the environment. Since 1982, the Governing Council and UNEA have jointly adopted 5 10-year Montevideo environmental law programs. And of course, today, the 31st of May in this year marks the 40th anniversary of this program. These programs have been consistently setting the strategy for UNEP's engagement in the field of environmental rule of law, setting out key objectives, strategies, and activities that guide UNEP's work. During the last 40 years, the Montevideo Environmental Law Program was responsible for developing and strengthening environmental rule of law at national, regional, and international levels. Important outcomes include technical legal assistance provided to countries in the development of national legislation, as well as the support provided to member states in the development of multilateral environmental agreements and other international environmental legal instruments. We are now, of course, in the 5th Montevideo program, which commenced in 2020. And we are going to show now a very short video to provide more context on the program.
Strong environmental laws and institutions are essential for planetary health, nature, pandemic recovery, and resilience. They underpin the successful implementation of any environmental goal, policy, or commitment, including the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals. At the 4th United Nations Environment Assembly held in 2019, Member States agreed an ambitious 10-year intergovernmental programme on environmental law. The 5th Montevideo Programme on the Development and Periodic Review of Environmental Law, or the Montevideo Environmental Law Programme, kicks off a decade of action on environmental law. The programme's vision is to promote the development and implementation of environmental rule of law, strengthen the related capacities in countries, and contribute to the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To achieve this, the programme has 6 objectives supported by 9 strategic activities. The Montevideo Environmental Law Programme is implemented by UNEP with the strategic guidance of an intergovernmental steering committee for implementation and a global network of national focal points designated by each member state. This global network on environmental law is complemented by strong partnerships with stakeholders for implementation. The programme partners with academia, civil society, the private sector, secretariats of multilateral environmental agreements, UN agencies, and intergovernmental organisations. The digital backbone of the programme is UNEP's Law and Environment Assistance Platform, or UNEP LEAP. This coordination and delivery platform allows member states to directly request support from UNEP and partners, and provides a comprehensive and searchable knowledge base of relevant environmental legislation, cases, model laws, and other guidance products. 2020 to 2030 is a make-or-break decade for the environment and guaranteeing the protection of our planet. UNEP is proud to support a flagship intergovernmental programme on environmental law that will help countries take the necessary steps toward a better future.
Next week, only a few days after celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Montevideo Programme, we invite you to join national focal points and other stakeholders gathering to define the 5th Montevideo Programme. This resumed in-person and hybrid segment of the first global meeting of national focal points will be held over 4 days from this coming Monday, next week, June 6, to Thursday, June 9. That's from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. East Africa time each day. This will be held at the UNEP in Nairobi, Kenya, with online participation also possible for those who can't attend the meeting in person. Interpretation in all 6 United Nations languages will be provided. 7 side events will be held, both in person and online, covering thematic areas relevant to the first global meeting. The purpose of this segment is to enable national focal points and other stakeholders to provide guidance on the priority areas for implementation of the program until December 2029. National focal points will also be invited to discuss the progress on the initial implementation of the program and other matters. Registration for online participation is still open. Please send an email to unep-montevideo@un.org. That's unep-montevideo@un.org with your full name, affiliation, and contact information. Now, the Montevideo Environmental Law Program provides an important framework within which environmental law has advanced. In addition, many individuals, institutions, organizations, and lawmaking processes have made significant contributions to environmental law over the last decades. We reached out to eminent figures across the globe to ask the questions, what have been the greatest achievements in environmental law over the past 40 to 50 years? And what is a key goal for the next 10 years? Let's hear some of these insights in this video.
On behalf of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, I would like to congratulate the United Nations Environmental Programme with the 40th anniversary of its Montevideo program. My name is Christina Voigt, and I'm the chair of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. I'd like to briefly address a couple of successes that we've seen over the last 40 to 50 years before I say something about what we may want to wish for the next 10 years to happen. With regard to the development of the environmental rule of law, I think the last 40, 50 years have been absolutely crucial, because within those 40 years, we've seen the development from a concern by some scientists, by some concerned citizens about certain environmental challenges, the development from these singular concerns to a global movement, to the development of several multilateral legal instruments that have been adopted in the course of the last 40 years, in particular CITES, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Climate Change Convention, Desertification Convention. So we've seen that massive development and engagement on the international level. And multilateralism in this field is particularly important because we need a level global playing field in order to meaningfully address many of the environmental challenges that we see. We need collective action. We need the avoidance of free riders that could create pockets where environmental degradation would be legally possible. But most importantly, we need global cooperation and collaboration to move forward. And that's really, in many cases, the only way forward. And of course, in the wake of the adoption of these multilateral instruments, we've seen significant action domestically in many legal systems. These international instruments had to be implemented through national legislation, through acts and regulations in order to comply with the international obligations. We've seen significant changes in almost all countries in the world. And what do we expect from the next 10 years to come? Well, first of all, continuous effective implementation. We are not there yet. We are still seeing capacity constraints, resource constraints to really effectively implement on the grounds the decision taken in or reflected in multilateral agreements. But we also have to see more effective compliance and enforcement. It is not enough to have the right laws in place if they're not also complied with and effectively enforced. And here we see a role of the judiciary as well as enforcement officers. And finally, we still have some gaps to fill. We still have some white spaces where legal development will be necessary, for example, in recognizing a legally binding right to a free, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, but also addressing illicit wildlife trade, addressing plastics pollution in the ocean, sustainable plastic consumption and production, but also protecting biodiversity in the ocean in general. In all these areas, we have initiatives underway where we will see hopefully legal developments happening in the near future, but that's not the end of the story. That then also has to be implemented and complied with and enforced in domestic legal systems. And in this context and many other contexts, the Montevideo program has been most successful and important in increasing environmental legal capacity in many, many countries worldwide.
When we celebrate 50 years of the Stockholm Conference and 40 years of the Montevideo program, we have a lot to list as major achievements. First of all, the creation of UNEP and the whole system that we have nowadays of environmental international agreements, constitutional provisions, and thousands of national and subnational environmental laws. But it's also a good moment to pay tribute to the pioneers, the law professors, the experts, the staff of UNEP for the excellent work that has been done. It doesn't mean that it is a work that is finished. It will never be finished. And there is a major gap in our work that we need to face in this decade and possibly in the following decades. The challenge of implementation. Environmental law is both theory but also practice, something that changes the way we deal with the environment, nature, natural resources. Therefore, in celebrating the achievements of 50 years, let's put implementation as the main priority for all of us.
When I took my first steps in environmental law in the late 1970s, the environmental problems in my country and region, the result of the rapid economic growth of the previous decades, were very visible. You could see, smell, and sometimes taste the air pollution in the mouth. There were foam cups on the pitch black rivers and canals in the cities. The water stank. There was the urban flight. The waste mountain grew, and toxic and other waste was dumped here and there without too much worry. Pesticides that are very dangerous for health and the environment were used in large quantities. Asbestos was still seen as a miracle product. As a result of the development of international, European, and national environmental law, these visible environmental problems in our region were largely solved. However, the greatest crises of all have not yet been averted: the biodiversity and climate crises. Overcoming these requires a radical transition of our production and consumption systems. The question that now arises is how environmental law can help bring about the required transition. A huge challenge is ahead.
值此联合国人类环境会议及斯德哥尔摩宣言50周年之际，我代表中国最高人民法院表示热烈祝贺，向为推进全球环境法治勇毅前行的各界人士致以敬意。构建人与自然和谐共生的地球美丽家园，需要世界各国和人民同心协力，抓紧行动。过去50年来，中国全面加强生态环境法治保障，生态文明建设取得历史性的成就。中国法院践行绿水青山就是金山银山，形成中国特色专门化环境资源审判体系和规则体系，协同推进人民富裕、国家强盛、中国美丽的现代化建设。去年5月，中国最高人民法院和联合国环境规划署共同举办的世界环境司法大会，通过了昆明宣言，宣告环境司法应秉持公平、共同但有区别的责任及各自能力原则，保护和可持续利用自然资源原则，损害担责原则，积极适用预防性、恢复性司法措施、公益诉讼和多元化纠纷解决方式，持续推动环境司法专业化、信息化、国际化。 未来，中国法院将按照世界环境司法大会昆明宣言共识，同世界各国、国际组织携手合作，为构建人类命运共同体贡献司法智慧和力量。预祝庆祝活动圆满成功。
Greetings from the Environment Court of New Zealand. I'm delighted to record a short message about one of the triumphs, I think one would say, of environmental law in New Zealand in recent years, and that is the according of legal personhood to a major river in the North Island of New Zealand, the Whanganui River. This beautiful river flows from the heart of the North Island in the Central Plateau volcanoes and winds between green hills and mountains until it reaches the Tasman Sea on the west coast of the North Island. Revered for centuries in the Whanganui tribes who take their name, spirit and strength from the river they live near, it became the first river in the world, as I understand it, to be recognised as a legal person. That happened in 2017, bringing closure to many years of argument and legal claims by the tribes, or iwi, and resulting in a Treaty of Waitangi settlement enacted as an apology to Maori by our government, the Crown. In Maori culture, tupuna, or ancestors, live on in the natural world, and it is the community's duty to protect both the landscape they inherited and those that came before them. Humans and water are especially believed to be intertwined. Having the river recognised as a legal person means that harming the river is the same as harming the tribe. If there is any kind of abuse or threat to its waters, such as pollution or unauthorised activities, the river can sue. It also means that it can own property, enter contracts, and be sued itself. Quite a remarkable concept. The acknowledgement enables the iwi to exercise kaitiakitanga, or guardianship, which can greatly enhance the ability of the community at large to protect this important and beautiful natural feature. There have been some other instances around the world of the according of personhood to natural features. There were some in India, I believe, but apparently later revoked. This particular instance seems, in my thinking, to be a marvellous example of the taking of an important step to protect a natural resource.
Thank you very much to the esteemed justices from across the globe, as well as the environmental law experts, for these insights. And really, these insights are just the start and the taste of the reflections and celebration of environmental rule of law that we are going to have over the next 24 hours. But they're an excellent starting point for our celebration. And we invite everyone to join as many of the following 12 sessions that will follow the celebration of environmental rule of law around the globe for the next 24 hours. We will hear from over 80 environmental law experts as we celebrate the achievements, as well as exploring the remaining challenges of environmental rule of law. We are now going to move to our first session, which is led by the IUCN Oceania Office, looking at the role of environmental law to address the pollution crisis. Thank you so much for joining the opening session, and we hope you will enjoy the first session.